Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Serve Extra. Today's training topic comes from Henry Rodriguez, who works at a plumbing, heating, and air conditioning company in Austin, Texas. And his question is this: Todd, how do you know when to let go of an employee? Now that's a great question. It's going to make for a great training topic, and I bet that every manager that's watching has asked that question themselves. And I bet every employee that's watching has asked the question, is that manager asking that question about me? Now I have to give the disclaimer. I'm not a lawyer and I'm not a human resources specialist, but what I am is someone who's owned an air conditioning and plumbing company before and someone who's had to fire several people. So I do have some expertise in this. Now I'll advise you, if it's a sensitive subject, seek the proper advice. Okay, so we're going to have four major topics to today's training lesson. I'm going to go ahead and give you the outline of those now. The first one is going to be production and performance, knowing and communicating the labor rule. Number two, it's going to be about attitude and the influence that you have with that attitude. Number three, it's going to be about coaching and training. And number four is about establishing the expectations so that we can avoid those negative consequences, that negative thing called firing. Let's begin with our very first topic, production and performance. Ultimately, this is what it really boils down to for most people. They figure out that an employee is costing them more money than they're making them. Well, that becomes real easy to decide, okay, it's time to let go of this employee. Now, I'll stress that there are some other things that you need to do before that happens, and I'm going to cover those in the upcoming topics. But just to hit on some of the rules for when you know it's time to do that, I want to cover that now. Depending upon your industry, in other words, heating, air conditioning, plumbing, roofing, landscaping, whatever that case may be, there is a magic number that exists. It's a labor percentage, and it represents the percent of the money that the employee gets to keep based off what they bring in. And just for the sake of example, if it's 100% and your company is based off a 20% labor rule, well then you need to follow that and you need to stick to your guns with that. And if the employee begins to creep into the 25 to 30 and so forth percentage, and they're doing that historically, well obviously that needs to be adjusted, that needs to be addressed, and your labor percentage is getting far too out of balance. There's a reason why that's happening, which we will address in point number 3, coaching and training. But the first thing to keep in mind is one of the first indicators of if you need to let go of an employee is going to be based off their production and their performance and considering the labor rule. Are they hitting that magic number? Point number 2 is all about the employee's attitude and influence. I had a boss one time that told me, Todd, we'll train you and get you the knowledge if you don't have it, but if your attitude turns bad, we're going to fire you tomorrow. And you know what? I don't blame him, because attitude is so influential. It really is the driving force that's going to determine a big portion of our success. Yes, talent's important. Yes, what you've done in the past is important, but what really counts is what you're doing today. And what you're doing today and with the energy that you're putting into today is going to be determined upon your attitude. Now, the other reason that is so critical in the residential home services trade is because, as each and every single one of you know, the attitude of your employee can have a great influence on the attitude of your other employees. And the very last thing that you want to have is someone who has a negative attitude, that's stuck in the mire, that's stuck in that pit of destruction, and they begin to reach out and pull other people down with them. That's never going to be a good thing, and it's going to be absolutely destructive. So that's the second thing to look for when determining should I be letting go of an employee, is you need to evaluate what is their attitude, why is their attitude that way, and what type of influence is it having on the rest of my team, my clients, and therefore ultimately my family, my company. Point number 3 is all about coaching and, if you prefer, training. And earlier we spoke about letting go of someone based off poor performance or even a negative attitude. Do you realize that both of those things absolutely can be influenced by the level and ability for you to coach or train your people? It's absolutely a fact. You know, in one of our programs I asked the guys, why do people weight train? Well, they do it for an obvious reason. They do it to get stronger. They do it to control their weight. They do it for all the health benefits. So let's just address this. If training works for the body, training also works for the mind. As a matter of fact, in more ways than with our body, we have more control over our mind. So coaching and training does have an influence on whether or not their performance and their attitude is negative or it's positive. Now, there are a couple points that I want to make sure that I stress when it comes to coaching and training. The best coaching, the best training is absolutely done on an individual basis. And if you are trying to decide whether or not to keep this employee, then let me stress that that conversation is done behind closed doors. Now, because you may not be wanting to let them go, really what you may want to do is get their performance or their attitude better. There's a couple things you're going to want to establish. Number one is you're going to establish the benefit as to why this is going to be good for that employee. Remember, they're volunteer employees that are representing your company. You want them to improve. Number two, you're going to establish a way about how you're going to go about helping that employee actually get to where you want them to be, but more importantly, ultimately where they want to be. And number three, you're going to establish some deadlines that have some real consequences to them. Those consequences don't necessarily have to be negative, okay? It could be the consequence of reward. It could be the consequence of dismissal. But it's very clear that you establish the plan, you evaluate why, you begin to train so that they can be better. You establish the guidelines as to what will happen when they are better or when they are not. Topic number 4 is about establishing the expectation. And this topic is probably more important than the other 3 combined. And ultimately what it's referring to is what happens before and after you hire this employee. See, let me paint the scenario for you. You're a manager who needs an employee desperately. You put out an ad. Now you need someone to help you through your busy times. So you list the technical skills that you're looking for. You list some of the expectations in the ad. The employee comes in. You hit it off on the interview process. You go, what a great employee. I'm hiring this person. Boom, it's done. They're in a truck. They're out there running service calls, and they're bringing back low average tickets. There was a big problem, though. You as the manager may have not, in the very beginning, established what was expected of that employee. Reviewed the KPIs. Explained what KPI means. Reviewed what the averages were that you were looking for, explained why that was important, and then confirmed could the employee do it, and have they ever done it before in the past. Now, granted, a lot of your best employees are going to be brand new to the industry, and you're going to provide them with the training that you're looking for, and you're more concerned with their attitude. I understand that thought process, and I think it's a good one. But I'll share with you this. Ultimately, you are going to expect and demand that they hit those KPIs that are critical. So I'm going to share with you that it's critical for you, manager, to find out in the beginning if they understand what's expected of them and do they believe they can do it with the proper coaching and the proper training. Not establishing the expectation because you forget. Not establishing the expectation because you want to hire them, not scare them away. Not establishing the expectation for any reason whatsoever is a failure. Here's the last topic that I want to cover. And it wasn't in one of the 4, so it's kind of a thought point, and it's this. For employees and for managers, I can share with you that letting go of an employee or employee quitting a job is one of the hardest things that you'll ever have to do. You don't want to do that. Managers stay up at night, they worry about it, they stress about it, they think about the person's family. All these things go through their mind, ultimately because they care about you. They want to have great things for you. They want you to do well, but sometimes the two don't meet in the middle. One of the things I'm going to share with you is to go back, look at the expectation, make sure it's well established. Because if you're coaching, if you're reviewing, if you're reconfirming the expectation and both parties realize that ultimately the expectations are not being met, and if you're documenting along the whole way, well, you're going to make those transitions and you're going to be able to help each other. Managers, if you have that open line of communication with employees, they're probably not going to be angry with you when it takes place because they're going to understand. You can help them transition because you'll know them very well into their next job. Employees, if you're failing and you know it, you're probably not going to be upset with your manager because you see it coming, the warnings were there. And if your manager is helping you transition into a new career, a new job opportunity, how upset with them could you really be? So that was this week's training video. I want to really thank you for being here. But before you go, I got to ask you to do a couple things. Subscribe to the video. Rate the video. Tell me what you think about it. Pass it along. Let's get the word spread. The more people, the better. I'm doing this for you guys. No other reason. So, hey, watch the show. Spread it around. Tell people about it. And here's the big one. I mean, the really, really big one. Submit your request. This has been Todd Liles with Serve Extra YouTube channel for service excellence training. And you have just been served a little bit extra.